Imagine what it would be like to be a prisoner in a jail, and then, when you're out, asked to come back and to be the chaplain of the jail. Wow. Hi, my name is Father Mike Manning. I'm a Catholic priest. I'm coming to you with the experience of, in my own life, of having encountered Christ. Jesus has entered into my life and changed me, and I find him the source of the peace and the joy and the fullness that I'm looking for, and that's why I'm coming to you. I'm hoping that you're going to hang around too, and you're going to listen to what I have to say and what my guest Ed has to say, and that this is going to bring Christ closer to your life. But today, as you heard from my little tease, we have a very exceptional person with us today. Ed was a person who was a long time, you said it was instead of 3 strikes, you were an
8 strikes.
You were an 8-strike convict, starting at a very early age in the whole prison system. And then, when you got out, something happened. But Ed, God bless you. Thank you very much for coming.
Well,
now, let me get the correct, you're the coordinator of the
I am the chaplain liaison for the Los Angeles Sheriff's Department.
Oh boy.
I was the senior chaplain for Men's Central Jail for 12 years, but about 3 months ago I accepted this new position where I'm coordinating for all the downtown jails.
How many downtown jails are there?
There's 3. We have 7 facilities in total for the LA County with a population of up to 23,000 inmates. We're down in population right now, where I think we're at 18,000 now, but that's more budgetary than anything else. And of the 7 facilities, only 6 are functioning right now, but I'm sure all 7 will be up and running soon.
Ed, tell us your story.
Okay.
I'm anxious to hear this. You told me a little bit about it, but...
Well, I ran away from home, stole a car, and wrecked the car, and went to the juvenile hall for that. I came from a very dysfunctional, if you want to call it that. That's a buzzword of today, the dysfunctional family. My father was a very violent man and a drunkard. And from a very early age, I was exposed to violence in the home. And from about the time I was 12 years old, I would try to defend my mother when he would be violent with her. And so by the time I was 14, 15 years old, I was pretty rugged as far as my attitudes in life. And I acted out in many ways to get into trouble. At 14, a number of things happened to me all in that same year. Some neighbors wanted me to come with them to an event at the LA Coliseum where Billy Graham was coming. And they were a Christian family that wanted to do something about this rebellious youth that lived in the neighborhood. And I went to the Billy Graham Crusade and listened to a story that Dr. Graham gave that day of a loving Heavenly Father. Well, I never knew a loving Father in my life.
Big contrast.
Big contrast. And for a long time, I hadn't cried. When I got in fights with my dad, where he was a grown man and could punch me and knock a tooth out of my head, I wouldn't cry. I wouldn't give him that satisfaction. And yet I remember going down onto that field that day in tears. That same year, it was actually within months of that happening, I was in juvenile hall for stealing a car. And actually that car was my mother's car, a brand new car that she had just bought. And while she was sleeping, me and some friends decided we were going to go joyriding, and I crashed the car. I didn't even know how to drive very well, obviously, at 14. And I wasn't about to go home, and knowing what I would face, and I ended up in the juvenile hall over it. Ironically, the day that my mother picked the car up out of the shop from being fixed, she was in a fatal car accident.
Ah, my.
She wasn't killed instantly. She died 3 or 4 days later, so I was allowed to go see her from juvenile hall in I can remember going back to the juvenile hall that night after seeing my mother and getting in a cell. I didn't have much of a Christian background at that time. My parents were Catholic, and I'd gone to church at Christmas and Easter, and that's about it.
Yeah.
My mother wanted me to have the Catholic background. My grandmother was a very devout Catholic her whole life, but it just didn't happen in our family. And so I didn't know what to do. I wanted to pray, but I didn't know how to pray. And I remember getting a rosary and kneeling down in my cell there in juvenile hall and praying out to God, saying, God, I'll be a good boy if you let my mom live. And of course, she died just a day or two later. And I was like Nimrod. I shook my fist at God. I wanted nothing to do with him. And a number of years I was in and out of First Youth Authority a couple times, and then at 22 I found myself in San Quentin during the most violent era of its history.
What did you done?
For the time when I went to San Quentin, it was for possession for sale of heroin. I was a drug dealer. I grew up in the San Fernando Valley, and I was dealing drugs and living I was in a gang, not a prison gang, but a street gang at that time.
You'd gone through all the initiation and everything else?
Right. Well, the first gang I got into was an Hispanic gang in L.A. When I was young, in a boys' home. After my mother died, they wouldn't send me back home to my father. So I had to choose who I was going to run with, so it was the Hispanic gang over in the West Los Angeles area. I was there for about a year, got in a lot of trouble. That's where I was first introduced to drugs. And it was about a year and a half later I was in Youth Authority, and it was a graduation ceremony every time you turned around, you know, going to a larger and more radical place. By the time I was 17, I was up in Tracy, DVI, Dual Vocational Institute, where they had both adult prisoners at that time and juvenile prisoners that were the hardcore troublemakers. And as I say, by 21, 22, I was in San Quentin as probably the most violent era in California history. That's when the prison gangs were starting. And 1 year there, I think it was 1974 or 3, we were the most violent year in its history. At that time, it was 125 years old. We were locked down in our cells 9 months out of that year, and yet they had more stabbings and killings in that 1 year than they'd ever had before. So that was my initiation into the adult authority.
Tell me a little bit, Ed, how did it turn around?
Well, during those years, I fathered 2 children that I never got to know. Their mothers rightfully kept them from me because of the life I was living. It mattered to me, though. Many men, it doesn't care. They could plant their seed all over town and they wouldn't care less. But I did want to know my kids. I told myself I was going to be the better father than I ever had and all that, which was not the case, obviously. So I have no animosity towards the women that kept my children from me, but it was a negative motivator in a lot of ways. When I get out, I didn't care about a lot of things, and one of them was because of that. Well, when I got out this last time, I was 31 years old. And,
so starting 14,
yeah,
now you're 31.
Right, and I'm getting out of prison for the last time. I was in Chino prison here in Southern California. And I was about three months from getting out, and I went out onto the visiting yard one day. I wasn't supposed to be out there, but I knew how to get out there anyway and bring some jewelry that I was making for some people, these buckles and so forth. And a man called me over, wanted me to show my buckles to his sister who was there. I didn't know this till later. He was trying to con her out of some cash so he could go buy drugs.
Hello.
And that girl became my wife later.
Wow.
She wanted to meet me. Get to know me, and her brother wouldn't fix us up, so she slipped a friend of mine a phone number and said, please have him call me. And I called her, and she started bringing a friend of hers up to call me out while she'd visit with her brother, and we'd kind of switch. 3 months later, she was at the front gate waiting for me, and we've been together ever since. We're coming up on 32 years.
32 years.
Yeah.
God bless you.
Now, when
was she some of the source of this this change?
Certainly God had a plan. She was not walking with the Lord at that time either. She had grown up in a very different environment too, a broken home and so forth. But she was a good person. She wasn't into the lifestyle I was into or her brother was into. She worked at an aerospace company, a local Northrop Aerospace, and she worked in personnel there. And I would use her car to run around while she's at work, and I would come in to pick her up. And the manager for the personnel department saw me in there, and back then I was real big. I was the weightlifter, and I have the tattoos, and I had the long hair then.
You've got a marvelous, marvelous set of tattoos.
Yeah, well, I try not to advertise that when I'm representing the...
All right.
I do go into prisons that way, because they can identify with it,
Sure.
of course. But for many years when I became a Christian, I used to wear long sleeves. I don't care where I was very ashamed of them, but now it's part of what God uses.
Sure.
It's a tool.
Sure. Sure.
But anyway, the manager saw me and said to one of the recruiters, "Who is that man? You know, who's that coming in to see Allison?" And the recruiter's trying to cover for my wife and said, "Oh, he's just checking on his application." Well, of course, I'm not going to try to apply there. They wouldn't hire me. Well, he made a joke and says, "Well, as big as he is, they ought to hire him over in tooling. They wouldn't need a forklift." She came over later and told my wife, "Have him bring an application in. John said I could hire him." And she got in a little trouble for it, but she made a joke out of it later when they asked her, "Why would you hire this man? You know, with his record, why would you hire this man?" "Well, I'm supposed to help hire minorities. That's part of the mandate. He's a minority. He's an ex-convict." She had enough juice, as we call it, to where it didn't matter. She didn't get in trouble for it. And they thought that I would just last the 90-day probationary period and they could get rid of me. But I was at least smart enough to realize this was my one chance at a brass ring, you know, to make a difference. And it did. That was the start of my transformation in life, I think, was to have the opportunity to get a job. For the first time since I was 14 years old, I got off parole and probation. I'd always had a parole or probation whenever I was on the streets.
Well, what I want to ask is, and this is going to be coming down. We're going to take a break now. There seemed to be a key from what you're saying, both with your wife and then even getting this job, of people loving you and caring for you.
Yes.
And that seemed to be the open door to perhaps finding this power of God in your life.
Right.
Human beings doing something and changing.
Right.
We're going to be back in just a moment. Ed's going to share with us some of the beautiful things that he's doing right now in the unlikely job of being a chaplain after such a sordid moving through his life. Stay tuned, please. We'll be right back. I am very excited to tell you that I have written a book, and I want you to be able to read it. It's a book that's called 15 Faces of God. It's a quest to know God through the parables of Jesus. I've labored with this book for a long time, and it's been a real labor of love because I feel that through this insight into the parables, we are opening up a wonderful insight into God. Now, I believe that Jesus was continually giving parables. They were ways of his getting out to many people, not just the people that went to synagogue and religious people. But parables were allowing him to get to the vast audience. And I couple that with the reality of how deeply Jesus loved his Father. We read in the Gospel of John time and again, "Oh, I come to do the Father's will." And when they asked him how to pray, it wasn't, "Pray the name of Jesus." No, "My Father." And what I've done is I've taken 15 of these marvelous parables, some maybe those that you hadn't heard too much about, and I allow us to open up the door of an understanding of who just God is. Some of the insights into God: searching, humble, giving, celebrating, loving, authentic, generous, trusting, and even optimistic. Please, for your for your gift and donation to the ministry of $20 or more. I would love to send you this book. And not only are the lessons there, but there's a chance for you to have deep discussions because of questions that I presented. Remember, 15 Faces of God. Ed, how did you encounter Christ? You all of a sudden found this woman who loved you in the midst of rejection. You found an employer that was able, and how many years did you spend working in the aerospace industry?
About 16 years.
16 years,
yeah.
Okay. But now, how did Christ come into the midst of this?
Well, as I mentioned, my children that I never got to know were a negative motivator in my life. I had two younger sisters, and both of them grew up with pretty messed up lives themselves. The youngest one was a heroin addict, and it was in and out of prison. She got out of prison about 2 years after I was out of prison, and she had a 9-year-old daughter who was panhandling on the street for food because her mother was spending all the money on her drugs. Well, when I found out about that, I went out and just took my niece and had her come live with us. About the same time, my wife found out that she was pregnant. We weren't even married. We were just living together, and I had told her I didn't want children. God has a sense of humor because, see, we have 7 children today.
Hello.
But, and we've had many more in the home. But when she said that she was pregnant, she thought I would, she just assumed I'd turn around and say that, well, it's time to go get an abortion because I didn't want kids. And when she asked me, what are we going to do? I said, I guess we're going to have a kid, you know. And so here she was trying to be a mother to a streetwise 9-year-old kid, and my child coming too.
And even your reluctance to have children.
Yeah, yeah. She was very nervous, to say the least. We had a neighbor who was a Christian, and she spoke to her one day and says, you know, me and my husband have been talking about maybe going to church. Do you know a good church? Well, they were Christians, and that was the first church we went to. We were there for 8 years. We still have many good friends from that church, although we've left there a long time ago. So
someone knocked on the door and invited you to come to a church. Is that the idea?
Yeah. Well, her dryer, it was one of those preordained things. That her dryer broke down. This is back in the days before Huggies. And she needed to dry a bunch of wet diapers. So the women over the back fence kind of thing. And they got to talking, and one thing led to another, and we ended up going to church.
Now, there's another side to this, though. Mm-hmm. Okay, you get this experience of Christ, but now you're moving from being a prisoner to being the chaplain of the prisons. How did this happen?
Well, I started off by me going to, I'd been in church for quite a few years. I'd been actively involved. I figured if I was going to do this, I was going to do this. And it started off with us doing things like being counselors for the kids' camp and ushering at church and those type of things. I went for a church plant to Russia at the beginning of the fall of the Soviet Union. And while I was over there, the Russian mafia wanted to shut us down when we were doing an outreach. And the missionary saw me, took a look at me, and says, I know you've got a testimony to give. And I thought I was over there just to be an usher and to watch everybody and take care of everything. And
the bouncer, as it were.
Yeah, and he wanted me to share. And that was the first time my pastor had ever even heard about my past, because I didn't talk about it. I wasn't proud of it. I was ashamed of it. And soon after coming back to the States, Chuck Smith, who was with Calvary Chapels, has a radio show, and a prisoner from Chino Prison had wrote Chuck Smith saying, would you send somebody that teaches the Bible like you guys do, you know, verse by verse through the Bible? And our church is right there in Chino, and he forwarded it to my pastor, Pastor Jack Hibbs, and Jack put a little note on, a post-it note on the letter and said, you need to pray about starting a prison ministry. Well, I'd been to prisons and seen all of that, been there, done that, didn't want to go back.
Sure.
And I didn't think they'd let me in. I really didn't, but one thing has led to another. I started a prison ministry about 17 years ago, and soon after that, I met other people through networking, and a man tried to start recruiting me to go into the LA County Jail. Didn't believe they'd let me in there as well, and It's one of my favorite verses now is Isaiah 22:22. God opens doors no one can close, and he closes the ones no one can open. Everything that's happened in ministry, I have not pursued. God has opened those doors. And through that, I've been able to go all over the world. I've been to prisons in Central America, the MS-13, 18th Street gang prisons, Germany, Russia, Mexico. One thing's the same all over the world. Prisons are the end result of sin. It's breaking God's law and man's law. But yet, God is merciful and a God of grace. And the message of the gospel needs to go in because that's what transforms lives. You couldn't be more down and out. And the only place to look is up. And there's a certain percentage of people that are looking for that. They're desperate for that. Oh, man, I've really messed up my life. What can I do? God help me, even if they don't know who that God is.
One of the things that I find in my own working in prisons is that it's a time of stopping. A lot of times, the people that I deal with in prison are running all the time. They're looking for the drugs. They're dealing the prostitution. They're looking for the power. And they're just completely consumed with getting it done, and all of a sudden you're stuck in a prison, and there's nowhere to go, and there's nothing to do except to reflect on your own life.
Yes.
And that can be a powerful experience.
Yes. Yes.
And if Christ can be able to be offered through the Bible or through a minister coming in and sharing with you, that could open up a wonderful, wonderful door of, gosh, what was the number again of the prisoners here in the United States?
Well, 2.3 million were locked up. Now, there's going to be less than that now because we are starting to let them go, but it's because of money. They can't afford to keep them anymore.
Yeah.
And there is an attitude change now within administrations where they are looking to the communities more. They're trying to start new programs. They don't have funds for it, so they have to look to the community, to the churches. So I think it's a good thing.
One of the struggles that I've had through the years is the great pain that, let's say, the father of the family is put in jail for 10 years. Mm-hmm. Whoa, what happens to the family that's left at home?
It destroys those families.
Destroys the family.
Yes.
What can we do as Christians? What can we do as Christians to, well, I'd like to get into getting involved with people that are in jail, but also how can we help those families that are so struggling?
Well, obviously we can pray for them.
Yes.
But we can do more than that. We can get involved in our communities, looking into there are a lot of good organizations out there. Prison Fellowship's one that has restorative justice programs. I know the Catholic
Friends Outside.
Friends Outside is another excellent program. There are many programs that are already established that are out there. Unfortunately, a lot of people want to reinvent the wheel, and yet with the new advent of computers and everything else, you can just get online and search and see within your own communities what there is out there. I think much more needs to be done for the families. I love the program that Prison Fellowship does with Angel Tree every year, where they go out and give presents to the prisoners' children. It's a good way to get into that home in the community with somebody from a church and make that connection.
We had a fine program on it was an organization that bused the children on Mother's Day.
Get on the bus.
Get on the bus.
Another great program.
Bring them all the way up, sometimes a 4 or 5 hour drive up to Tehachapi or wherever they were going, to have the children visit their parents.
Get on the Bus is a program they do at the women's prison here in Corona that I'm involved with prison ministry too, and we do a concert every year on Mother's Day, a day before Mother's Day on the Saturday, and on Sunday they do the Get on the Bus.
I turn to Matthew 25, and Jesus says we are called to visit those in prison. But then he throws a zinger in, and he says that when you do that, that's how you encounter me. Mm-hmm. Have you encountered Christ in the prisoners?
With the hundreds and hundreds of volunteers that I've had come in over the years, is that they are so amazed at how much they bring back out with them. They think they're going to go in there and bless these prisoners, and yet they are so blessed.
It's an encounter with Christ.
Yes.
There's an encounter with Christ.
Yeah.
You that have sent in cards and letters and emails, we want to pray with you. So stay tuned, please. There's going to be a moment of prayer. We'll be right back. I am delighted to tell you that I've written a book, and I'd love for you to get it and read it and be blessed. I've worked on this book for many years, and I believe that if you read it, your relationship with God is going to grow very, very deep. It can be a blessing. It's called 15 Faces of God. What I've done is I've taken 15 of Jesus' parables and allowed those parables to be a door that opens to us through Jesus into who God the Father is. Oh, you're going to be really shocked in many ways, but also blessed by the insight of God as a searcher, as an optimist, as a lover. Please, for your gift of $20 or more, I would love to send you this powerful book. Remember, 15 Faces of God. I want you to be blessed. Ed, one of the joys of the ministry is being able to connect with the people that are watching, and rather than me give all the words, they come back and they send these prayer requests. And I'm urging you, if you would you please stay in touch with us? You can find us on our webpage, and also I come at you every day on an app on your iPhone and Android, and that can be connected also with the webpage. It's called iGod Today. And so if you want me to come at you every day, I'll do that. But Ed, this is wonderful. Look at this. Let's pray over this. Listen, this is Philip from South Carolina, praying that his wife and children will come closer to the Lord. Michelle from New York, guidance, direction in my life, and wanting to know what God wants to do with her. Matafa, this is from Minnesota, an 8-year-old son that doesn't talk yet. Let's just lay our hands on these people, whether you wrote in these notes or whether there's something rising up in your heart right now. Lord, there's so many people that are hurting. They're in prisons, Lord, not just prisons of walls or prisons of bars, but prisons of fear and separation from you. Come, Lord, with your healing power into families. Come into bodies that are sick. Come into relationships that seem to be broken and just there's no hope of coming back. Come with your healing and your power.
Yes, Lord.
And may Jesus' love for you always make you smile.